And also give the chance to, troubleshoot in case anything goes a little weird.
Yeah.
Is there's always something. Ooh, already 8 or 9 watched on YouTube. That's nice. And as always, everyone, if you can hear, let me know. If it's some people are saying the Odyssey stream, the last one, didn't have any sound, but the YouTube, which is whatever most of the people were on, did. So I'm just making sure. Bitcoin Cash podcast says coming in loud and clear. All right, I'm just gonna share it on Discord again, just to make sure everyone knows. Everyone piles in. No one's like, "When did this happen?"
Right. Of course.
And Telegram too. I see lurking a lot in Discord. Do you spend much time on Telegram or the other ones?
I do lurk a lot in Discord. I spend a whole lot more time in the private channels in Discord than in the larger group channels. So both the current and the elect trust protectors are in Discord. So that's our primary messaging tool. But then as far as a lot of the public discussions, I'm also in Telegram and a lot of the others too. So.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's the thing. One thing I've noticed is like some people say like, "Oh, I don't like X network or whatever." Discord is kind of taken over in a lot of cases as like the must be on kind of thing for me. Like I'd be kind of screwed if I wasn't on Discord. Like 90% of my professional stuff happens through Discord and Twitter. And like if Instagram, if Facebook, if all those other things, if email even got taken out, like as long as I had my Twitter and my Twitter DMs and Discord, I think I'd be okay. I think I'd be more than fine. So that's just kind of funny how that works.
Yeah, it's a constant conversation. I was talking to a Bitcoin maximalist friend of mine the other day at a user group.
Nice.
And it was the first time I met him, like a month ago. And so I asked him the question, all right, hey, where can we chat? Twitter DMs or Telegram or whatever. And he says, it's all the same third-party risk. I don't care.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Now the fun happens in Signal encrypted messages. That's where all the funner groups, but like the more professional, like, everything's fine, everything's more normal, the party and in Dash's terms, at least, all the real action is in the after party, which is, I guess it's encrypted because it's a Jitsi hangout, kind of like, but that's where, so we got, Agnew Pickens watching, Mark Mason's watching, Fulagi Johnson, also known as a million different pseudonyms, your new compatriot, Hilawi's watching. Might be a good time to roll the intro. All right, so I'm going to roll the intro credit stuff, the intro graphic, and then we'll just officially get started. All right, here we go. So, hey everyone, welcome. Happy Friday, or happy an hour later if you're watching the other podcast. I'm joined by the one and only Patrick Quinn, Trust Protector, longtime Trust Protector, and for another long period of time. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me, Joel, and thanks for the schedule gymnastics, by the way, for getting this scheduled.
Yeah, no problem. I try to keep myself to arbitrary schedules when I can, because otherwise my life is a disaster because I have no personal discipline. But it's always self-imposed, and so if I can always change stuff around on people. Just people complain, "Oh, did I miss the podcast? Why was it this week?" It's like, well, that's why I've been very communicative about people being about when this kind of stuff is going on. So if you're missing this, it's your own fault. Sorry. Well, actually, maybe I didn't share it on Reddit. I can't remember. But if you're just lurking on Reddit, you need a better life, because Reddit's kind of a dark place these days. Why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself to people? I think people who know about the Dash Trust have seen your name there somewhere, and people on Discord have seen your handle somewhere. But there might be people who have actually like no idea who you are, where'd you come from, all this kind of stuff. So why don't you just give the interview question I always hated the most is tell us a little bit about yourself. But yeah, so tell, at least in the context of Dash, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'll do like 20 seconds of just demographics and that stuff, and then we'll fast forward
Mm-hmm.
to the Dash part of my life, so the
Mm-hmm.
interesting stuff. Um, 49 years old, born and raised in Chicago, married with 2 daughters. I've been in IT for 25 years, software specifically for 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's a little personal, a little professional. My Dash journey starts with Perry Wooden, which a
Oh,
lot of
nice.
people will recognize that name for sure. Way more people than still would recognize my name. So Perry was an employee of mine. I own 2 companies,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll talk about those a little bit more too, maybe. One of them's a Dash company, so that's definitely part of the Dash story. Um, but one of them is just a 20-year-old software development firm, and we've obviously been doing that for a long time. Perry was a director of development services for us, so he headed up our software engineering team. And Perry was the third in line. I did that first as the founder,
Mm-hmm.
typical, programming founder kind of situation.
Yeah.
Then I hired the first person to take that over from me, and then that person hired Perry, and then Perry eventually took over from that second person. So the baton was passed over the
Mm-hmm.
years. And then I lost Perry. He left, and this is about 2015. And I was like, I thought we were living the software dream. Come on, what's going on here? And he had mentioned Dash before, and just in side chats and things like that, talked a little bit about it. But now he was really diving all in. So this was Node 40 that he co-founded with Sean Ryan, and they were building the Masternode hosting business, one of the Masternode hosts that are out there. So Node 40 Masternode hosting. So it was time to go all in on that. So then Perry left, and I said, all right, well, shoot, let's keep in touch. And that's when I got into Masternodes and learning more about Dash. And it really piqued my interest. And so, and philosophically, I've been interested in non-government money since I was a kid. So that was an easy affinity for me. And like anyone who's interested in these concepts and the institutions that are involved, once you read a little bit, you just can't stop, right?
Of
So
course.
then I was just immersed in it. Anyway, but on the practical everyday reality front, Perry's over there working at Node 40, and we just keep in
Mm-hmm.
touch. And then,
Funny interjection on
yeah,
Perry
sure.
about on this same, well, it was on a different YouTube channel at the time, but about almost 5 years ago, in June it'll be 5 years ago, I interviewed Perry for Node 40. So yeah, I definitely know who you're
Ah,
talking about there. But it's crazy how time flies. Could have sworn it's like a year or two ago, but it's like June of 2017 was that. So yeah.
yeah, for sure. And so then he comes to me, a year and a half ago or so, and says, "Hey, there's this thing called Dash Trust Protectors. I can't do it anymore. I'd like to throw my votes or so, not in my votes, but my endorsement behind you, if you will. Would you be
Mm-hmm.
interested?" I was beyond interested for sure. This is my 6th board position, if you want to think of it as a board of directors position, which it really is.
Mm.
I've been president of 5 different boards, so I'm used to volunteering and trying to help out, kind of outside of regular work hours, if you will. So I jumped in on that, and it must have been Perry that helped get me elected. I don't know. He pulled
Hmm.
some strings behind the scenes or something. So that worked. Um, that was last year's election. But something was brewing at the same time. So then Perry had come to me. We've kept a really good relationship even after he left. And he says, look, at Node 40 right now, it's all about their balance product. I don't know if you know about their balance product, but it's crypto accounting,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
blockchain, ledger accounting, and all of that. And needless to say, it's a big, big deal. And there are a lot of people very, very interested in in being involved in that and in funding it and so forth. And a lot of people interested in doing legit crypto accounting, right? Which is really hard. You know, these ledgers, these wallets it's really, really weird stuff as far as accounting. And then of course the status of crypto as an asset fundamentally is weird, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
of course.
Everyone knows that story. So you can understand why they would say, hey, we need to focus here, right? So we've got masternode hosting, we've got balance, we got to focus, and so part of the story too is that my first software company has been in the cloud for a decade now. So we moved formally into the cloud in 2012. So, and Perry was part of that because he worked here. So he knew what we knew and what we were capable of, and cloud is an important part of masternode hosting in this case. So he says, would you guys be interested in this part of the business? So once again, Perry must know me well, because whenever he calls me and says that you'd be interested, it's like yes. That. So I said, absolutely. As it happened, as my company had evolved, I had taken on 2 equity partners, so the 3 partners. And we were actually looking for kind of a next project, as my company's 20 years old. And that's, some people say that when you're 20, you're just now no longer a startup. So we're out of our startup phase. Things are, stable and we have a plan and all that. So when Perry's offer came along, we jumped on it. So during this first term of my Dash Trust Protector work, we actually bought Node 40 Masternode hosting. So that is now Zymerai Masternode hosting. So that is my second company that I own, same 3 partners over both of them. And that certainly brings us current in my Dash journey. The only thing more current is the election just happened, and here I am again.
Yeah, well, fantastic. I mean, kind of long in the tooth of the Dash world, but it's kind of funny how there's some people who have been involved for quite some time, but everyone kind of knows they're like out on the public stuff. And there's so many people. I've noticed this a lot in the last couple of years. A lot of people have popped out of the woodwork with Dash that'll be like, oh yeah, like I'm trying to get back involved. And it's like, oh, great. How'd you hear about it? It's like, well, back in 2014, Evan. I'm like, oh, wow, you've been there for a while. You just haven't been here. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I've personally noticed that there's starting to be a little bit of a culture shift where a lot of the Dash world in the past was very passive, very just like, I'm an investor, I have this, I support this, but I don't really get out there. And then there's a lot more getting out there, for lack of a more a scientific term, recently. And I guess this is a good representation. And personally, from what I know I'm close with a few of the quite a few of the Trust Protectors in general, but especially some of the outgoing team, and they always spoke very highly of you. And as you're the continuity between the teams of, the sole survivor, right? The one who's here from the last cycle, who's now here in the new cycle. I figured that it'd be a great time to actually get a little bit of a handle on what the Trust is doing, especially because no one really cared about the Trust for the most part up until relatively recently, right? It was in the last few months that there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, drama, that a lot of it was like, well, according to what we heard about, and then everyone's all like, in the he said, she said, it's like the Trust has been the kind of mediator. And then now, it's like now the Trust has been called on for a bunch of interesting stuff. So let me just kind of, there was a few, I'm going to hit a few of the, more general talking points that we go to some of the pre-asked questions. And then we kind of go from there, which, by the way, this is a good time as any to mention, if any of you listening go to cointr.ee/thedesert links, you can throw in some Dash with a donation with the message, and I will guarantee you I will read those out. The ones in the the bus of the sky, right? The people's live chat. I can elect to ignore some of those if I don't like them. But if you throw some Dash behind them, I can't ignore that. Starting off, what is the actual everyone kind of, I think, gets the theoretical role of the Trust, which is to basically act as the real world liaison of the will of the network behind Dash owned assets, of which Dash Core Group is the big one, or the big thing that most people kind of think about. Practically speaking, what do the trust protectors actually do? Ooh, you got on a mute again or something.
Here we are. Better?
There we go. Yep.
Sorry about that. The practical role of the trust and the trust protectors is actually there's like an organizational practicality to it, but then of course there's just the human practicality. So one of the things that starting with the human side. So as you said, it's kind of the referees in the room, right? A board of advisors that's independent, that can be contacted, that basic, in theory, anything can be discussed with, and et cetera, et cetera. So, I always thought that one of the things that, of course, this is not unique to me, one of the things that stands out about Dash to a lot of people who love it and support it is the governance model, right?
Yeah.
And the governance model is part built in, but then this trust and trust protector arrangement is also part of that governance model. And the reality is that, okay, so we're waging revolution, right? We are displacing the banking industry and money and all of those highfalutin things. I believe that deeply. It's the most exciting thing, ranking right up there with the printing press and all of it, freedom and these sorts of things, the internet. So, but I believe in head in the clouds and dream big, but feet firmly planted on the ground. So we're waging this revolution in the real world. And, it's still so early in the game that we still have a lot of people to convince, not just to convince about crypto generally, but about Dash specifically, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this governance model is a real competitive advantage. It's a real differentiator. But these old economy folks, a lot of people are going to be very interested in the idea of a board of directors. It's a very, very familiar concept. Everything has a board of directors. Your local church has a board of directors. Your bank has one. Your food bank has one. Your schools. It's a universal concept. So when they hear, oh, Dash, board of directors, i.e. the trust protectors, whew, okay, great. So maybe that's something we can get with, and it's more relatable, as opposed to if the whole thing were just some impersonal smart contract.
It's kind of the Ghostbusters factor. Who are you going to call? Like,
who are you going to call?
It's not just, well, how do you type something into the command line in this wallet to like the next, like, no, who's in charge? Who do I talk to? Who like runs things? And obviously the reality of things is in more of the cypherpunk complicated, whatever that is. But as far as like, at least there's a human face to this, a organizational face.
Right. And then, so that's just kind of like the organizational human side of it, but there are some practical legal things that are accomplished with this overall infrastructure. It's truly innovative. I mean, Ryan pointed that out when he was really talking a lot publicly about this 4 years ago, as it was just getting off the ground. I mean, Ryan and the other folks who put this together really should be commended. It's genuinely innovative, and it's a bridge between, again, these two worlds, which I think is really important. Even if you deeply believe that we're waging a revolution here, if you want to wage a revolution in education, guess what you need? Lots of teachers. Or if you want to wage a revolution in medicine, guess what you need? Lots of doctors, right? So you have to create bridges that sort of bring people along. I think that the trust and the trust protectors can be one of those, the concept of it, right? As a practical matter, though, they thought through this a lot. Originally DCG was like a nonprofit, like a trade association.
Yeah.
A lot of really suffocating legalities to that arrangement. As a corporation, the only entity that can elect members of a board of directors are the shareholders, but you cannot be unnamed shareholders in a U.S. corporation anyway, right? So that would mean like one of the questions that comes up is, well, why can't the masternode owners just directly elect the board of directors and thus directly control DCG? Well, this is the reason why, because most masternode owners would not agree basically to being outed and doxxed, right? And so
of course
some would, but so there's then a sort of an extraction of the shares into the into the trust itself, and the trust is 100% shareholder of
Mm-hmm.
DCG. This is why, by the way, we always get questions, probably every election. I've only been wrong for a couple, but why do we have to go through like KYC and legal documentation as trust protectors? This is the answer, because you can't have like these unnamed shareholders in a legal entity like this. So so that solves a lot of the legal problems and still allows us to have some genuine legal standing in this conventional legal world and economy, but not in a way that is unseemly or unacceptable to, say, masternode owners. Or the other thing that it does then is it actually assists the decentralization. It enhances the decentralization.
Mm-hmm.
Even Ryan was talking about the fact that, like, for example, if DCG had been a partnership, then assets and profits are owned by the partners, right? So
Yeah.
this is the kind of an arrangement where you can dissolve things and walk away with assets, and it's really risky to the actual long-term life and health of the project. So C corporation, of course, has very different rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but to have all of that concentrated, even in a C corporation, would be more concentration. So it sort of deconcentrates the ownership structure. And then the last thing that it does is it directly connects this independent body, the trust protectors, to the network, right? Because the
Mm-hmm.
network elects us directly. So I'd say those are the important bits.
Yeah. It's kind of crypto is kind of like came from, for lack of the better term, like your mom's basement type thing. Like someone just created some stuff, someone just posted some stuff on some forum, people deploy some code base here and there. As a funny kind of story on that thing, a lot of people don't know the Monero main website is getmonero.org, because monero.org was run by some community member who at some point had like issues with the main team and he just didn't want to give the domain up. So they had to start over with a new domain. And so anyone go to monero.org, it's still a Monero site, but it's like not the official one. And so can you imagine if, let's just take a page out of the old school, like Tungfa, who used to do a whole lot of, Philip, who used to do a whole lot. What if he just decided, you know what? I hate this. I'm leaving. I'm taking it, like the domain, the Twitter handle. I'm taking it all with me. And it's like,
yeah.
What are you going to do? Okay, you're going to start over from zero. You're going to lose all these followers, all this search engine optimization, everything like that. But now if you actually can have ownership, but it's not like a company where now you have like now you have centralized control over what should be a decentralized network. It's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, for sure. And again, they really thought through this. As corporations mature, this usually takes decades, but eventually they start investing a lot in like succession planning, right? For this very
Mm-hmm.
reason, even entirely privately held corporations, because it's important, right? So, this is only the fourth Trust Protector election that just happened. So we're not even
Yeah.
very far into it, but this is essentially succession planning. And Ryan in particular talked a lot about that in writing about the concept. It's making sure that all of it survives the original group, the OGs, the original founders, or the original volunteers, or whatever, whether that's DCG or the trust itself and the protectors. And here we are. It's very healthy. So
Yeah, and that's something I think a lot of people don't really appreciate is Bitcoin was led by Satoshi Nakamoto, who then has not reappeared. Again, I don't care what the BSV people say, but is and then since then leadership over the project has kind of been in all different directions. But it's kind of, because it was the start of a movement, it kind of survived despite that. But almost every other project has had some kind of a central figurehead and hasn't really moved well to survive that. Like Vitalik Buterin with Ethereum. I'd argue Ethereum's probably big enough at this point that it could probably survive and figure out how to keep on going despite that. But still, the founders involved, Litecoin with Satoshi Light or Charlie Lee, the entire project kind of lives and dies by his word, kind of. Monero had, of course, the Fluffy Pony era, and he's kind of moved out of the project a little bit, and it's kind of gone in some interesting directions, which probably beyond the scope of this. But like most of these things, It's like founder, and then where you go? Like Justin Sun for Tron, and then you go for, Jared Tate with Digibyte, and there's been a lot of internal consternation in that community about how things have gone since he's sort of not been as active or things like that. But then you have Dash, which Evan Duffield, and almost my entire history with Dash, Evan has not really been heavily involved with the project, from
Yep.
like late 2016, early 2017. And then you have, the Ryan Taylor era, which is kind of like up till like recently. And then Ryan resigned and moved on to other things. And now I don't know what if there's a figurehead at all, one could say, but it's definitely the project keeps kicking, keeps moving along, I would say smoothly, with lots of different actors doing lots of different things. And the succession continues, right? It's not like, oh, what are we ever going to do without this guy?
Yeah, and as Sam will tell you, the
Mm-hmm.
development team, so right down to the core of what we do, the essence of what we do, which is software engineering,
Mm-hmm.
even that is, I don't know what the number is, it's 90% turnover as compared to, say, just like 3 years ago, roughly
Mm-hmm.
speaking. By the way, if I get any factoids or numbers wrong, I'll fix it in comments afterwards. But anyone can just complain, and I'll make sure I
We'll fix
follow
it
up.
in post.
Fix it in post. Yep. But it's not just like players and people
Mm-hmm.
overall. It's even just right down to the development team, and it keeps moving along. The part about those sort of cult of personality projects, the thing about that is that it's one of those situations where it works great until it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like it's working great, and you just think, wow, it just must be like almost magic. Like it's got all of its own momentum, and it doesn't need CEOs and all that. And then almost every time, that's one of those situations where poof, it's gone overnight because it was taken for granted, right? And none of this actual structure and actual, thoughtful governance was put in place. But here we are with Dash. Um, we're pretty far past that. So I like that.
Yeah. And that's kind of I've noticed this, and Bitcoin again, because it's such a movement, has kind of not had that problem to the most part. But there are some, like, I guess the let's move to off chain scaling path has been fraught with difficulties, and I personally believe that we're going to see a major Bitcoin governance crisis in the next few years, just based on the fact that uh, the transaction fee load of the network is going down rather than up. And as the block rewards going down, at some point you're not going to have anything to pay the miners with. And what are you going to do then? And so at some point there's got to either be a giant fee spike, which completely will mess up a whole lot of things, or you've got to change something significantly, like maybe still prioritize off-chain scaling, but still raise the block size. And it's kind of a similar thing with Bitcoin Cash. I've noticed is Bitcoin Cash was created by with people. A lot of people don't really, realize this, but it's created by Amari Sachet. And people just say Roger Ver did it. No, he didn't. He just jumped on board as a big proponent thereof. But Amari Sachet left, I guess by force. He got kicked out of Bitcoin Cash and is now running his own thing called eCash. And so, where is Bitcoin Cash going to go without its major development, without its founder, like without the founding vision? And so, that's going to be interesting to see. So, Dash is kind of at this, it already took the hit from the founder going away. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of, we're running on momentum of where the project is. And so, it's kind of interesting. Let me hit on just it's a very not non-specific question, but about you as the trust protectors. What have you guys been kind of doing for the last few months? Like if someone said like, "Hey, how's work?" Like, what have you guys been up to? It's kind of an open-ended question,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people actually don't know anything near the answer to that.
Yeah. So you mentioned the drama. So for better or worse, the last
Mm-hmm.
2 to 3 months in particular have been very much consumed with dealing with that. Now, it is our job. We sign up for it. So I'm not complaining. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging that it's taken a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we we did a lot of investigation and et cetera, and wrote a formal response, findings, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that, which hopefully that sort of thing is behind us now, but we'll be ready if it's not. So that's the less exciting stuff that we've been working on. Now, the most important thing, especially since February, is that Ryan stepped down. Mm-hmm. And so we've been giving a lot of support to the effort to deal with the CEO vacancy. So mm-hmm. that's really been job number one, despite, the drama seeming like it's all consuming, and at times it is, and it can feel that way. But really the truth of the matter is that job number one has been working with DCG to figure out what to do about this. So I just sent some documents over yesterday, had a meeting with the DCG board on Monday. So that's job number one for sure. A similar question was like, what are the 3 key initiatives that the Trust Protectors have been working on? And then I think there was a related question about, what's the handoff look like to the new team that's coming in? Number one is definitely supporting DCG in the absence of its leader, former leader Ryan Taylor, right? So that's been the number one order of business, lots and lots of time, by far the biggest time commitment. And again, it's an ongoing process to figure out what to do next and then communicate about it. We actually have some things outside of urgent response that are just more proactive things.
Outside of hair on fire.
Yeah. By the way, then unexpected things, like we just had an election, but the election also presented some surprises. We actually had to try to recover some old code and kind of revitalize it a little bit unexpectedly. And Huawei and Ryan Gull at the incubator really stepped in and helped a lot on that sort of stuff with others. So, but that was another one of these things where for a week or two, we thought, wait a minute, do we have election software? But, we did, and just had to be sort of dusted off and fired up again. So, those sorts of administrative things come up. It's not all that trivial though, because it's the election. It's kind of an important piece of the puzzle. And we learned a lot about the election process and voting. Some things that were just reminders of from past elections, and some things that we learned anew. So that's positive there. We can talk about that. But anyway, back to the point about more of the proactive stuff. So the existing class of Trust Protectors, which of course is the last year's class, so we're still seated and about to be unseated. There's a deed, an actual deed that comes through the trustee, and that's the official moment after all the paperwork's done. So when I say the current Trust Protectors, I mean last year's class that's moving on, except for me. We have a big proposal and some really good stuff that we want to publish and present to the network as soon as we can. It's actually been kind of backburnered, unfortunately. If someone had asked us on January 1st, what will you have accomplished by the time of the election in March, we would have said, well, we'd get this proposal out to the network for a vote, and then we would present this, we call it the issue flow. So I'll just tip my cards a little bit and the Trust Protector cards a little bit. We're trying to formalize the process of communication with the Dash Trust Protectors. So the entire process, it's almost like publishing a software spec. This is how it works. This is exactly the flow, if you will, like application flow, that your issue is going to flow through. It has like statuses at different stages along the way, and et cetera. I can't say enough about this last group of Trust Protectors. It was a really smart group of folks, and a lot of diverse experience, but a lot of Dash experience and historical knowledge and so forth. So, so that's one of the biggest initiatives that's actually more proactive and is in the category of just shoring up the Trust Protectors, clarifying the role to the community, clarifying the communication channels, and as we call it, the issue flow. Yeah. So, and by the way, the unfortunate part about it is, had we gotten this out the door sooner, it would have mitigated a lot of this drama, or maybe even totally prevented it. So there's just a higher standard of professionalism with the way this will be done. There are formal stipulations for once an issue is submitted, discussing it privately versus publicly. Unfortunately, I think we've got that balance wrong. And so much of this, you mentioned it earlier, of the drama was adjudicated as he said, she said kind of drama publicly, like in discussion forums and so forth. And that's it's not that there should be censorship or muzzling or anything like that, but anyone who knows anything about human interaction knows that at some point you just got to huddle up in private, and especially if you've got to say some uncomfortable things. So this new structure that that hopefully the new trust protectors together with me will endorse, and we'll be excited about getting out. We'll get that out, and it will make a big difference. So that's an exciting project too. And then there's just some administrative stuff. We're looking at the service level from the trustee that we have, and some of those just kind of technical, legal, organizational things.
Well, before we move on to other ones, we did get a super chat here, anonymous. As someone who's founded or run software-based companies, how do you make sure your top projects meet their deadlines and that everyone is on the same page? So it's kind of like a process-based question based on your experience.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned at the outset, I've been in software for 23 years. I'm a developer by trade. I've cut a lot of code. I don't cut so much code these days. I'm never going to give Sam a run for his money. Your job's safe, Sam. But having been there and done that, and then having risen to the ranks of software management and executive positions, I've seen the entire business, but I've taken it very seriously to really study this part. So, for example, the one conference I go to every single year for 15 years, unless there's a pandemic or something, is called the Business of Software. And it's nothing but like a few hundred software founders, executives that are all focused on the same problem. It's a really outstanding, I consider this a replacement for like a B school degree or something like this. I wouldn't have wanted to go to business school, but this is the next best thing. And it's very, very specific to how you run software companies, right to the point of this question. So I will say this in brief. This is the hardest part of software development. You'd think, well, wait a minute, come on. Programming is hard. Hierarchical, authenticated data structures, the Grove DB that we're working on, Sam and the team work on, it's hard, isn't it? That's got to be the hardest part. Okay, so yes, that is hard, but it's hard in an engineering hard sort of way. The kind of orchestration of all the parts of a software team to all be working together, working towards the same goal, towards a goal that has been clearly communicated and can be met. That's it. That's why we're having the Agile revolution, because this stuff was just about impossible. Nobody even tried in previous generations of software. That's why the Agile Manifesto was written and the Agile revolution happened, and all the things that followed on, Scrum and Lean, and eventually DevOps, and the tooling that goes with all of that, and the orchestration of all the tooling, continuous integration, continuous deployment. So this is like trying to run an orchestra times 1,000. I mean, it is like, it's because if you don't have it, it's cacophony. You miss all those things. So, so what I will say is that it's hard. Tell me again what the specific question was. How do we, go ahead.
Pop it right back up.
Yeah.
How do you make sure your top projects meet their deadlines and that everyone is on the same page?
Right. So you have to orchestrate all of these things, right? So you have to have a product roadmap. That's also why the term product is ubiquitous all over the software world now. Product chief, product engineers, product managers, product owners, right? Product, product, product. That's an overall philosophical, cultural revolution that's washed over software. So you have to have a product roadmap. You have to have product people. You have to have all of this tightly integrated, right? And then there's tooling and process and rhythms. So when you get it right, it's as right as rain. It is the hardest thing to get right. I'm going to say it again. It's harder than HADS, than hierarchical authenticated data structures. Sorry, Sam.
Yeah.
Sam would probably agree with me on this, actually, on this point, because the reason is kind of obvious if you think about it. It's the human side, right? And that's where things get messy. It's not binary anymore. And So that's how you do it. It's just kind of a general description. Actually doing it is really hard. And of course, DCG needs more of that. That's not a slight to DCG. Everybody needs more of that.
Sure,
I will tell you one time
some of that.
Absolutely. The most expensive consultants anyone's ever seen are lawyers, because like if you have to get off a murder rep or something, you're going to pay $1,000 or $3,000 an hour, like O.J. Simpson, right? To use an example.
Mm-hmm.
But the next most expensive consultants I've seen were DevOps, agile process consultants, and they charged $40,000 a week. This is the Nicole.
How can I get into this line of work again?
Yeah. And I bumped into Nicole and Jez and Jean, Kim. Their stuff got purchased by Google. It was so good, and Google is just obsessed with process, as they have to be. And they came across Nicole Forsgren and that DevOps Research Associates group and just loved it so much they bought it all. They just bought it. They said, we got to have this. Anyway, by the time I bumped into Nicole and these folks, I'd been in my career for a long time, and I thought the same thing. I specialize in the wrong thing. I want to be doing 40,000 a week. But anyway, that's a sign of how much demand there is to get this right. So
yeah,
that's where we're at.
Well, so the next kind of thing is, how have the DCG staffing issues been? How have you guys been dealing with that? So obviously the big one is Ryan Taylor. I believe, was it early February, indicated he was going to resign at some point, but based on controversy surrounding a vote, he decided to do that a little bit sooner than anticipated. And most of what the Trust Protector has been dealing with, from my understanding, or a big piece of it, would be trying to find an interim CEO or a full-on CEO replacement for the Dashcore team, and et cetera. And at the same time, also, I believe quite a few other DCG staff members have indicated that they're moving on. So how's that been so far, trying to like deal with the staffing turnover, kind of?
Yeah. So a lot of the turnover is recent, and I think that confidentiality wise, I certainly won't say anything that DCG already hasn't gone public with.
Yeah, of course.
So Arden, for example, in June, folks that are in Marcom roles, marketing communications, broadly defined. A lot of these departures are recent as well, but they're also recent hires. And a lot of them come, I think almost all of them come on the heels of Ryan's departure too, which is an expected thing, right? Especially since, the DCG staff the board was pointing out to me the other day that, hey, it's been a couple of months, we need to start hitting the gas pedal on this. That's correct. But that's not an unexpected thing. If you're kind of headless for a while, and nature abhors a vacuum, as the old saying goes. And one of the things that fills the vacuum is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so I think a little bit of that has happened. It's also true that there were a lot of people, I think, that weren't happy with the fact that Ryan departed in the manner in which he departed, right? So now morale becomes a factor. So I think there was a specific question like, should the community be worried? My answer is honestly, no. So there are gaps. We need to fill these gaps for sure. The remaining board members, Sam, Glenn, and Robert, are very busy. They are absolutely, they were already overworked, I think, but they're overworked increasingly now as a result of Ryan's departure, and then some of the division of labor changes as a result of additional departures. But a couple of things. So first of all, I think the majority of the recent departures are also recent hires, and that was just kind of bad timing. It happens. You join a company at a point of transition, and you just think to yourself, I'm not sure about this, and I'm going to split. So that just happens. That's okay, and good luck to those folks. The last thing I'll say is that the engineering organization is really stable. So I don't know if the number's zero, but I think it's pretty close to zero in terms of that turnover. By the way, there's a situation going on in the world which is grave. It's the gravest of all situations, which is war. War is hell. And we have a fair number of people, especially in the engineering team, that are involved, are affected by that. And nonetheless, talk about a shot to morale. There is no greater shot to morale than worrying about personal safety of you or your family or your property or your bank account. I mean, this is really genuinely horrid stuff. And despite that, in addition to maybe morale problems or worries about the future of the project, there's a lot of stability there. So those are some thoughts about the state of hiring and departures and all that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, it's interesting, and I think fascinating, a good thing. So, Dash Core Group has kind of way back before it was a Dash Core Group. It was just the core team or whatever. It's always been, it assumed the position of the head of a crypto organization traditionally has been the developers, the dev team. Like the Bitcoin core team has been like the developers. And so that's like most of what Dash was originally. But then the core team had a few other people, like the guy running the Twitter account, and there was like a biz dev guy and stuff. And under Dash Core Group, the roles and responsibilities really expanded to a lot of different things. And now it seems like the most, I mean, I have to say, while the development team has been doing some pretty awesome stuff as of late, I think they get a little bit too much of a pass when deadlines are missed and things like that, and people, the devs are untouchable, kind of. But one thing is for sure is there is no controversy, as far as I know. The Dash Core Group should be doing most of the protocol development, right? That seems to be the least controversial aspect. And so it is a very positive sign that the thing that everyone in Dash wants the most, and the thing that no one seems to mind that DCG is doing, is intact. And it seems to be, that seems to be like, I don't know if that's a silver lining. For some people, it's beyond a silver lining, but I think we'll at least settle on a silver lining that what people care about most seems to be moving forward quite well.
Yeah, and a lot of credit for that. I mean, of course, Robert and Sam and Glenn work hand in glove, but Sam, of course, is the CTO, and he's responsible for that team directly. And so Sam's learned a lot about the C and the O in a CTO title. He knew plenty about the T part. That was never the question, right? So,
yeah.
But man, it's a crash course in the leadership role, and then the officer role, which is, basically having to answer all the questions and deal with all the stuff, So it's doing a lot.
Yeah, I think he's been doing pretty well with that. So we have like a period of transition, obviously, with a lot of Dash Core Group, because as you mentioned, Ryan left, and then a lot of recent hires also left, and Robert's transitioning out, but the Dash Trust Protectors have almost entirely changed hands, and so there's a whole new group of people, and it's kind of been interesting from my perspective. Like, what do I think about everything? Because from what I've seen, like, I was a big fan of the last crop of Trust Protectors. I knew most of them quite well. And the ones such as yourself that I didn't know super well, I heard great things about. And then we have this new crop. I know almost all of them pretty well as well. And I'm also very on a personal level, right? Again, it could be very different, and you could tell me that it is very different. There's a bunch of scumbags in there, but probably, as far as I know, the new crop is a really great group of people too. So, how have you found this new group, and how has it been to work with the new group of Trust Protectors?
Yeah, so we're only just starting. We have a combined private Discord room, channel, which is combined old and new Trust Protectors. So there's a lot of communication happening in there. We are, as far as the transition goes, we're trying to honor our protocols,
yes,
such as they exist. So technically speaking, you're a Trust Protector when that deed is issued by the trustee. And so we've had some meetings. I actually had a one-on-one meeting with Rodrigo, for example, right after the election. That was great. I had a really great initial interaction with Rodrigo, and I'm really excited about working with him. I've just had less interaction outside of chat rooms with the others. But so the point I was making though is that we're not just spilling the beans and doing the full transfer just yet until that deed is issued. The risk would be, of course, that if you don't pass the sort of KYC type of identity verification, then you can't be a trust protector. It's a prerequisite, right? So if we would have opened up private documents and confidential information, then now there's just someone walking around the world that has access to that and shouldn't. So again, we're just trying to follow the protocols. They exist for a reason. The good news is that this year we're going to do it much faster than last year. Last year, my goodness, it took, I don't know, like the better part of 2 months on the calendar to get into like an all group substantive meeting with all the paperwork and everything figured out and email lists updated and all this sort of stuff. So that's definitely not happening this time. So to start, as we're waiting for the paperwork to finish, we've got this full group chat room, and we're already working on some of the knowledge transfer. I actually think 1 or 2 of the new protectors issued questions as well. So this AMA is actually part of the knowledge transfer because they're finding out a lot of the details for me as I go on about it. So, so to the other part of the question though, so this much I think is good news about the trust protectors. So in any project that you work on, if you do really good work, that work tends to live on past you leaving. So this could be anything. It be, there have been committees that I created myself on boards that I served on before, and I always wondered, man. So since I came up with that idea and created it myself, is it gonna survive, or is it just gonna peter out after the term's up, sort of thing? So what I think is that when you do really good work, it has a tendency to have its own momentum, and it lives on. And the trust protectors prior to last year's group, but most definitely last year's group, they've done a lot of good work, and I do think that that'll carry forward. And then I'm not worried about personalities. It's the other nice thing about it is it's just it's almost like developer culture. It's very natural meritocracy. So people can speak freely and you have their own opinions, and it kind of already has its own, even though it's not been around very long, it has that kind of a culture. So that allows, it's not so buttoned down or restricted or anything. So you can allow, lots of different opinions and personality types, I think. So that's positive.
Well, that's cool. I'm going to jump around with a few of these questions. Before that, though, I did get a super chat. It's not entirely, or it's kind of it's tangentially related to what we're talking about from the Bitcoin Cash podcast. That Bitcoin Cash was created by Satoshi, not Amari. Amari's tenure in technical leadership, such as it was, is key because Bitcoin Cash is the only coin where the community has overthrown the dev/leaders twice in hostile circumstances. No other coin is kind of close to that level of battle-tested, community-driven governance. Have you been following the CTV drama in BTC? They are having a version of governance crisis you mentioned right now. I have not. I want to follow. If anyone wants to point me in a direction on, tag me on Twitter, DM me on wherever. I do want to keep up with that because that is very interesting to me. I know that the CTV or issue is a big upgrade thing, and I've heard several people mention drama, but I have not witnessed the drama. And I love some drama. I love to at least popcorn, look at it from a distance. But the one thing that's kind of interesting, Bitcoin Cash is the only one that's overthrown its dev/leaders twice in hostile circumstances. Hostile is key because one could say, Dash is turned over twice, more or less, if you want to go like the figurehead kind of route. But the first one was, at least to public, it was not, I would say Evan moving on is not really hostile circumstances. The second one, I would give it a half hostile, right? Because there's no ignoring that there was a bunch of drama, some of which happened on this very podcast, and that there was a contentious high participation vote, which caused things. There's no ignoring that happened, but also it was a pre-planned transition that just got expedited, I guess, and a lot of and the organization slash team behind it, that was in charge of Dash development, is still there, and most of the people are still around, especially like the technical side is still there. So I would give that like a half and half. And I do think, although, I do think this is an important thing to mention about governance, right? Is that governance changes, I believe, should a sign of health is mostly peaceful, right? Entirely peaceful is not a sign of health, because that means that someone's in control and that person just has the tentacles of power. And at the same time, I think that Bitcoin's governance system, including all the forks, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but there's a deficit in it, which causes a lot of damage on the way out, on transitions. And so I think that more explicit governance would help those things. Again, it's a baseline of decentralization that you can't even turn over, and it's a great sign for the original Bitcoin code base, and then Bitcoin Cash being able to stay around and do its thing, and Bitcoin SV going this way and eCash going this way. It's a sign of decentralization that people have been able to fulfill their dreams in forks. And at the same time, as I wish that there wouldn't have to be forks, that there'd be more explicit governance kind of system.
Yeah, you can bet I'm going to be looking up that double hostile takeover of the development team, I think is what they were saying, correct?
Yeah, because as much as it's semi off topic, I guess, but like obviously Bitcoin, Satoshi left. The Bitcoin Core developers at the time ended up favoring not increasing the block size and ended up wanting to do an off-chain scaling route through a bunch of soft forks, not hard forks. And the first of which, segregated witness, was viewed as a non-starter for people in parts of the Bitcoin community, which ended up becoming the Bitcoin Cash community. And then Amari Sachet was kind of the lead developer of Bitcoin Cash. And then Bitcoin SV with Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre and all of them had a disagreement over some other upgrades. They ended up splitting off into their thing. And then basically over a kind of like Dash's treasury, but not like variable, as in only to the one team, the Bitcoin Cash developers, Amari Sachet, the more or less founder, again, it's contentious if it's Satoshi or him, whatever, ended up trying to impose basically a salary for his team, hard-coded in. And that got him the boot. And he got kicked out. Yeah. And he created eCash, which is, floating around there too. And so where now he can do all his ideas, he's kind of abandoned the Bitcoin branding entirely. It's more free to kind of innovate at that point. So that's the TLDR of like a decade of crypto like history and block size wars and all this kind of nonsense. So if I glossed over anything, it is a very brief recap.
The block size part of that history is referred to in the at the same time in public discussions about establishing the trust protectors. But it's more talked about in terms of the governance model, because I think it predates the trust protectors a little bit. But the point is that just the block size improvement proposal alone just took years and festered in the Bitcoin world, and Dash got it done like that. So yeah. That's a nice comparison.
It's funny because I don't think that any of that debate, I don't think Dash necessarily skipped anything. It just got to a decision, And I kind of, at the same time, there were decisions that never went to votes where if people remember, there was a lot of Dash community members who ended up leaving the Dash community after a failed governance proposal and ended up joining the PivX project. It wasn't like PivX is a code fork of Dash, but it wasn't a chain split. It wasn't, and then they ended up bouncing off to Smart Cash and then other stuff. But so, this crypto governance could be like a decade long. Like you could do a lot of stuff. Let me hit this question that your new colleague, Free Dash Guy, as he's known, asks, he says, how much work do trust protectors do behind the scenes? Is it a 1 hour a week? Is it 2 hours, more or less? And yeah, let's just start with that. Like, how much time are you putting in for free here?
Yeah, so I don't want to scare anyone. um, we the trust protectors, in my experience during my first term, are very accepting and forgiving of whatever you can contribute.
Mm-hmm.
At a minimum, contributing at least via live chat, because we spend a lot of time in chat rooms chatting, and then meetings, the regular meetings. So but that's kind of the bare minimum. Now, even the regular meetings, we were meeting monthly, and then for like the better part of 3 months now, we've been meeting weekly. And because of everything going on, these have been longer meetings, but there have been supplemental meetings as well. So of course, the DTPs extensively interviewed all of the officers at DCG who were remaining the board members after Ryan's departure. Those were multiple, like 4-hour meetings. I mean, they were marathons, just a lot to dive into. So, the short answer is that it's been a lot recently, but sometimes it'll be a one-on-one. Like I'll have a meeting with a one-on-one with one of the DCG board members, and then I'll bring those notes back to the DTPs and we'll discuss it as a group. So not everyone has to be. We did have some full group interviews as well that also went 3-4 hours across multiple meetings. But it's also important to note that these are unusual circumstances. So we're not going to have an executive leadership crisis on a regular basis. These tend to be more occasional type problems. So I know that's kind of a long-winded and not a specific answer, but that's because there is not a simple answer to it. So let's just look at I'm a glutton for punishment. So I've put in a lot of hours, and a lot of the current and former trust protectors did too, the outgoing folks. But if someone gets COVID and that happened, or if someone is on vacation and those sorts of things happen, we're just very understanding about giving someone the time and then just catching them up, at another date and time. So there's definitely some flexibility to it, but right now it's a pretty decent commitment. It'll be hours plural per week. Possibly more depending on things you might volunteer for. So that's the answer for now. We're looking to get it to be a well-oiled machine so that it's just, I've been on boards where once a month, 2-hour meeting, done, everything is just smooth and repeatable. And then even on that one board I was the board president of was a school board, and sure enough there was a principal crisis, just like CEO crisis, right? And it was a 25-year veteran principal, and so it wasn't just even amongst executive leadership crises, this was an extra challenging one. So then all of a sudden, same thing, or a flare up of meetings and a lot of extra time committed. But anyway,
yeah, I bet school board meetings are lit these days.
Yeah, thankfully I've been off of the school board for a good long time now. But yeah, nowadays, holy cow.
Yeah, so let me hit this because it's more specific, and we hit the more general ones. Tente Stefana, very long time Bash person, like 8-year veteran, I would say. Says, how do you feel about extending the length that trust protectors serve? I feel 2 years is too short, yet I can see this helpful in keeping from having an entrenched or stale TP board. But I feel there can be too much discontinuity. Could we, or would you be interested in having 2-year terms with half of the trust protector up for re-election every other year, so you never lose more than one half of the board at a time? Interesting question.
Yeah, and he's got his finger on the pulse. The short answer to that one is absolutely. It is a challenge right now, and to do that, we'd have to really change our bylaws and get that formally changed. But it's absolutely the right idea for sure. Ryan himself said, gosh, I feel for you guys. You have a year to do whatever you're going to do. You're not sure if you're going to make it. By the way, the process of onboarding new trust protectors is just now getting smoothed out and easily repeatable. So we almost lost like 2 months on the calendar last year before we could get real substantive full group stuff going. And then you got 10 months left, right? So yeah, that's a problem. And I'm thinking like almost every other board I've been on already has the staggering in place. Sometimes it can take a while to get there. And this is kind of a startup board. But yeah, like 2-year terms and staggering. There are, as far as the entrenchment problem, there is a mechanism for ejecting a trust protector if necessary. So that's a mechanism that's in place. That's a worst case scenario, of course. Shouldn't come across that, but there's a mechanism to do it if there's some more serious problem before the end of the term. But I think 2 years is a nice sweet spot, and then because you can get a decent amount done in 2 years and get some real momentum and real continuity. And then the overlapping concept also works. So that, I mean, we were this close, by the way, to having an entire turnover, right? As far as vote totals go. So that close. So that creates its own kind of disruption in the form of the discontinuity that was mentioned in the question, right? So discontinuity is a serious momentum killer. Anyway, so I think that's a great idea, and I'd like to be able to get to it as soon as the next term, which is conceivable, but it depends on how many other.
And so for that, I think we should, like, this as a way of getting it started for the first time. I would probably say the sole incumbent DTP plus a random selection, like completely like name out of the hat, to make the other 50% would then be up for re-election next year, and then the other ones would be the incumbents, and then just do like that. And so obviously if you do a good job you should stay, and if you if you do a good job you should stay, especially since it's a lot of work and it's as a volunteer position. It's like, it's kind of rough to get someone to. So it's not like we're going to be like, hey, a new group of people every single year. There's going to be a few new faces. Maybe not. Maybe just one or two, because it's just like, who cares? That's the biggest one. Who actually cares about Dash enough to do all this nonsense? But then, who's able to and who's like not a loose cannon. We've had some interesting people on the Trust before as well. But yeah, that seems like I think that's actually a fantastic idea. Thanks, Tanti Stefana. Now, let me hit on a couple others. And obviously, anyone who wants to throw in stuff at the Super Chat, feel free. These are getting a little bit more involved. So, would you support Dash Core Group reviewing its legal structure to explore more decentralized alternatives? And just like the context of that is Dash Core Group, I believe it's a Delaware corporation. And obviously, it runs like a traditional company, kind of. And obviously, however, with, structurally at least, however, with a decentralized autonomous organization kind of funding, paying the bills and making decisions on, a monthly voting cycle basis and so forth. So, but what about changing that structure to make it less of a traditional corporate kind of structure? What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I support it. I know that the sort of purest idea about this is, why do we need corporate structure at all? And unfortunately, there are a lot of good answers and important answers as to why we need it. But conceptually, yeah, I'm very much in favor of it. DCG's board, I will say, is well aware of this, and this is basically a constant consideration for them. They're always thinking about different moves they can make. So they're already thinking about it and thinking about it. There are a lot of considerations. So again, we're in the revolution here, but until we are entirely free and clear of things like bank accounts, you can't just willy-nilly decide to do away with them, right? A corporation without a bank account is basically dead in the water. I mean, in a lot of ways. It's certainly because, again, as you pointed out, Joel, this is a Delaware C corporation, right? It's a very tried and true, very specific legal entity. The rules are all well established and well known. So things like moving to a favorable tax jurisdiction, especially as a crypto project, could get you kicked out by your banking partners. I mean, they might just say,
Mm.
forget it. We're not, you're going to launder money, and then we're going to be in trouble with the federales, right? So there are a lot of implications that are non-trivial if they were to bite you. So short answer, yes. If we could wave a magic wand and either not be incorporated or be incorporated in some really, really freedom favorable jurisdiction without impacting our operations, then I'd say let's do it in a minute. But it's complicated, and Glenn and the gang know this, and they're careful about it. So it's possible that there are some changes coming, like let's say over the next year. But
Mm.
that's one, of course, like I was saying, you got to be careful with.
Interesting. And so now that you have a better understanding of how Dash Core Group operates, uh, if you could make any operational changes, like as a dictator, I guess, like without having to get consensus, you would just say, okay, these are the operational changes we change of the way you do things. What do you have any ideas of some of the prime ones you'd throw in there?
Yeah, for sure. We would enhance these orchestration elements of a healthy corporation that need to be enhanced. That's what I was talking about earlier. I call it, I can't remember if I use this term, but I call, like in terms of the work that I do, like in software professionally, I call it's almost a form of alchemy, right?
Mm.
It's combining elements in such a way that they almost have, they're more than the sum of their parts, which has to do with orchestrating marketing and marketing communications and development and development process and delivery schedules, working off of a product roadmap that's properly prioritized. Like I was saying before, um, it's really hard to get that part right. It's the hardest part of software development and delivery. Um, so if I could wave a magic wand, I would have, and by the way, we're already dealing with this, right?
Yeah, of
Because the
course.
CEO vacancy has us asking the question, well, okay, if we're going to have a new CEO, who's that person going to be and what's that person going to do, right? So my personal opinion on the matter is that we would benefit at this point from a technical CEO. Doesn't have to be a former engineer or a current programmer or anything like that. In fact, we probably want more actual just management experience than someone having been buried in code. But if you've studied this part, and especially if you've gotten good at it, that I think is the role then that could help stitch it all together and help with delivery, and in particular communicating about delivery. That's certainly a challenge. So as you pointed out earlier, we've been late repeatedly. It's harder and harder to communicate when you're late. Credibility is waning, So to help in that area that orchestrates everything together in a healthy functioning whole, that is, if I could wave a magic wand, that's what I would somehow find for DCG. Turns out it's not easy to find, and then it has to be integrated with who's there already, right? So then there's that piece, right? Things like coming in with an iron fist, and especially in developer and engineering culture, man, you got to be really careful with that sort of thing. So
Mm.
you could find someone who's got this knowledge of how to orchestrate a software delivery team specifically and market it and communicate about a product roadmap and meet promises, all that. But then personality wise is the wrong personality. And now you are going to have exodus from the engineering team. So
Yeah.
you created one problem, but you solved one problem, but created a much bigger one. So I'd want to do it in a way that actually helps the team and helps it get to the next level. But I'm glad I think the term magic wand was used in that question because, man,
Hmm.
that's hard to
It's
pull off.
difficult. I think it's
Yeah.
very interesting how like crypto is kind of the inheritor of like the Apple movement, like Macintosh, Apple, and it's funny how like quickly things change in the world. I think as a random observation about life, I think that the world's changing way faster than ever did before. I think just new things just keep popping up. One thing's for sure, like Elon Musk is the perfect CEO for the modern era in a way, because, or he is the archetype, I should say, because he is the, first off, a technical CEO. Like, is Tesla a tech company? I mean, kind of. It's kind of a car company too, though. Is SpaceX a tech company? Like all those companies, Twitter a tech company. Yeah, like all that stuff. And he is the a technical person, like a smart technical person. But he's also like this weird people's champ vibe to him. You know, that kind of like very. It is kind of a cult of personality a little bit. Like, who even knows who's the CEO of Microsoft right now, or like Tim Cook. Does anyone know what Tim Cook's up to? Like, no one cares, kind of, right? It's, but like this highly, like this bombastic tech CEO is the archetype of the modern era right now. And that's as kind of one of those things that I think that was a little bit against the grain for a while was when Ryan Taylor was running Dash Core Group. He was kind of not Mr. Big Bombastic and also not the tech CEO. And that kind of like ran as just a cultural, like a counterculture kind of thing. Like the culture's going this way, that's going this way. I do kind of like that observation that a lot of people have been saying, a lot of people much less well thought out and intelligent as you, I would say, have been saying the same type of thing, which is, you know, everyone kind of, you know, they kind of feel it. They get where the wind's blowing. They see that crypto, especially, everything's a tech company these days, but especially crypto. And you need some sort of a tech CEO who's able to get out there in front of people and communicate, do the Andreas Antonopoulos kind of a thing, you know, the Hoskinson thing, the all that kind of stuff. That seems like to be what you want. And you know, I think Sam is doing a great job in his current role. When I've seen him put his toes into the a little bit more than that role, I've been impressed as well. But like, it doesn't have to be him. There's plenty of people it could be, but I do kind of, on a personal level, kind of agree with that general assessment. Now, one more thing on this. There have been a lot of recent resignations in Dash Core Group. And so that would be obviously Ryan Taylor left. Robert is on the way out. Arden left. Chris Huff, from what I hear, is also on the way out. At least that's what Sam seems to have confirmed. June for the, you know, and then there could be some others I'm missing, but that's a pretty good chunk of people. Should the community be concerned over this kind of change, or is the change, or do you kind of see it as a good and / healthy for the network?
Yeah, this is related to the question we touched on earlier. So it's almost 100% outside the engineering organization for what that's worth. Not that you know, content and marketing and those things are not important. They really are. If we're not telling our story and telling it well, then that's just the reality of modern organizations. We are not going to grow. It's a very busy, very loud world. So just emphasizing that that's really essential. But for hour by hour development of our product, so to speak, which is, you know, the Dash software and core and platform and all that, that part is, as we said earlier, that's stable. And so, and then as we touched on before, you know, a lot of those departures were also recent hires. And I think it more reflects coming into an organization that feels chaotic. So anyone can empathize with that. It's not pleasant, and it's not, you know, confidence inspiring. So I think that mostly explains it. But you know, then it's also worth emphasizing that there's just a lot of hardworking, dedicated people left doing good work. So that's what we have to work with. And I am really confident that hopeful and confident that the trust protectors will help stabilize morale, maybe even somehow get the you know, the inspiration level up and the excitement level up. So we're focused on that for sure, is helping across all of these challenges. But between the board of directors and the staff inside DCG, as well as the trust protectors, I'm not worried. We'll be fine, and we this too shall pass, as the old saying goes. We'll get past it.
All right. Well, let's hit on this one here, right? What do you think of, and this is something I've had some opinions on too, and we're just discussing competing governance models between just the straight up Nakamoto consensus and then Dash's more explicit version. But what do you think of Dash's governance model as a whole? And do you have any like valuable criticisms to that? Any like, do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Like, what do you think?
Yep. So I think it needs, if there's a criticism, it needs to be clarified.
Mm-hmm.
Again, however you feel about marketing or branding or selling, there was a book written, I don't know, this is maybe 30 years ago now, called The Nation of Salesmen. And it had to do, this was actually a precursor treatment of topics that became more prominent when like social networks developed. So what have we standardized on calling social networks? Social media. Each individual is a media organization, right? Story to tell, personal brand, all that. So this is just the way that the whole world has moved. So so applying this to the governance model and the trust protectors, we need to brag about it more. We need to make it more front and center. It basically needs to be marketed better, just like, say I keep referring to the hierarchical authenticated data structures because I've been nerding out reading about GrowDB and all that. Just like that story needs to be told. The governance model story needs to be told more and better. And I think it's something that's incumbent on the new class of trust protectors over the next year. This formally published issue flow, sort of the specification for how the governance model works and how issues are raised with these highfalutin trust protectors, I think that'll help. And then there are other ways that we can trumpet it too. Another way that we can improve that is to recruit. And so at Zymerai, as a master hosting company, you can bet that we are absolutely trying to recruit more investors to Dash Masternode ownership. So brand new people. This is just the same as signing up new wallets for more and more everyday people who were not previously part of this world. So with high net worth individuals and other types of investors and investment groups, we're trying to bring more of these folks in. The more new guard we bring in and fresh blood we bring in, I think the stronger the governance model gets as the trust protectors themselves, as that entity matures and gets more experience under its belt for participating in this. I think then that'll start to build some nice momentum for the human portion. So those are just some thoughts. Like we talked about earlier, I think it's a real differentiator, but as if you've been in any kind of like business or product or anything in the last couple of decades, that the best mousetrap does not always win. It just doesn't. So we got to tell our story better. We got to show success. Of course, we have to continue to innovate and build cool features too. But anyway, so those are some thoughts on how that'll get better.
Yeah. It's funny, that comment about the best mousetrap doesn't always win. I would kind of, in a way, argue that it does, but it's not what we think is the best mousetrap. There's a lot of factors that are past the technical thing. Maybe not the best mousetrap, but the best mousetrap company wins. And there's little things that we might not notice or care about that really matter. Like just throwing in some random like crypto things. Obviously, like the Bitcoin brand, carried a lot of things, but that's very well earned, right? That's just, you can't do anything about it. We wouldn't be here without that. But then there's something to the simplicity of the branding and marketing of Litecoin that worked a lot better than Dash in the short term. I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing. You should rebrand Dash to like Litecoin Cash or anything. I don't think anything of that. But there's something about, it's like Bitcoin, but it's in the name. It's like lighter. And what is it? Silver to gold. Oh, I use gold. I get it. It's just right away people get it. And just like when you're Dash digital cash, like what is it? Is it well? And then there's the amount of time people have to go into it to figure it out. Just starts to like decrease the utility of the project to them
Yeah.
because they didn't get it right away. And there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for pure interoperability. Like, for example, hitting the Litecoin example again, being on the most exchanges, the most platforms, just being on the most ATMs, just like being ubiquitous instead of like, well, it was dark coin, now it's not. And then, well, some things delist because they heard the name dark. And then like just those things, like the technical innovations Dash has had in some ways have been less important to the market as those little placement and branding things that Litecoin has done. And it's, you can't argue against the free market. It just is. It's what people value. And I think that kind of gives a better roadmap on how to improve those little things.
You just reminded me of something too that's a supplement to the answer to that, which is the voting process itself. As so a criticism of the governance model is that voting is broken. Now, I say this with mad respect to the way voting has been developed so far, but we have to be honest with ourselves. This is an early adopter technology, to use the phrase from the best-selling book, Crossing the Chasm. Voting has not crossed the chasm. It's really technically arcane. We were having some good conversation with Ryan and AJ and there's some others from the incubator about this. So I mean, folks know about this. That's a usability and a removal of friction thing that we really got to get done. I think we can get that done over the next year or two. Certainly, it's more and more important to. I think there's a question about voter apathy too. Some of the voter apathy is absolutely technical friction. It's not actually apathy. It's apathy after spending 15 minutes reading about how to vote and signing messages and open the command line console of this, that, or the other tool, right? That's it.
Well, let me actually throw in a very pertinent data point on all this kind of stuff. And this has been publicly posted about Discord channels, so although it might seem like insider info, it's kind of out there. There's this wonderful fellow by the moniker of XKCD or XKNFT or whatever you want to call him, DJ Cluster, whatever he wants to go by.
For short.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he and another wonderful individual, Demo, run this thing called MNO Watch, where it's just a great resource of like voting tracking. You get to see votes come in. Part of the thing, and this is a very fascinating way, like to people who are new to crypto, especially to learn about privacy, is masternodes are completely pseudonymous, right? They're not tied to anyone's physical identity. And therefore, if someone has 100 nodes or one node or whatever, it doesn't matter because you can't tell. Well, you can, kind of. If you know what to look for, people have done some cluster analysis of voting, and they managed to identify one individual or one group of one organization, but it's still a single entity known by the name of WeeJohnny. And if you're out there, WeeJohnny, thanks for voting for the Dash Marketing Hub. It's appreciated. But it's basically a couple hundred masternodes that act as one. And this entity voted according... this is all out there, right? This entity voted for there's actually a page on WeeJohnny on mnowatch.org, which is funny to look into. But this voted for all of the Trust Protector candidates that ended up winning, with yourself as the lone exception. It was a single group or individual that wanted a change in the Dash Trust Protector leadership. And part of, from my understanding, and if I'm completely wrong on this, someone can correct me, but from my understanding of this, because of the way the voting system worked, you had to individually vote with each of your nodes, right? You have to take an individual action. And this person went, vote, node 1, vote for these guys. Node 2, vote for these guys. Node 3 went all the way hundreds of nodes down to do that. And so this person, in this case, had an outsized influence, other than just honestly being a big part of the network, on this thing because of just the friction of that. A lot of one is able to, I guess you could assume, a lot of people with more than one node just didn't want to go through like their 8 nodes or whatever, going vote. Whereas like if they're on a site such as like Dash Central or something like that, they can just vote with all their nodes with one click. And so the user experience, we see the results of this user experience thing in real time. And I find that to be really fascinating because I am the consummate pro user. I'm like, the pro amateur, the guy doesn't know anything except what works and doesn't. And I notice the joy and difference in using applications that just every half second extra takes my eyes to find what I want, makes me hate the app more. You want to cut that down, and the time it takes just to the bit.
Yep.
And it's a real, like, you have real attrition of usage. Like, if I have to do this extra step, I'm not going to do it at all. I'm just going to not. And we have this with the voting process, and I completely understand what you're saying about the voting process from a user friendliness standpoint needs to be absolutely overhauled.
Yeah, if you look at it as a voter turnout percentage as compared to the total number of masternodes on the planet, which is always somewhere around 4,300 these days or so, right? It's a low voter turnout. So using that as a measure, yeah, that looks like voter apathy for sure. And then the end result is what turns out to be a pretty non-decentralized type of electoral phenomenon, like one whale turning an election, right? And if that is a single person, you're talking about a single person that turned the election. Now, it's nothing in the world. We'll get through it. But yeah, I was also fascinated to look through those all those WeeJohnny numbers. I followed all that. I just assumed, that it should have come for me too, and I just maybe bent over to tie my shoe or something, and the bullet just went flying over my head or something. That's my theory for how I was spared. I figured it was an accident, but yeah, it happened. But yes, all of this is argument for expanding masternode ownership but expanding voting within current masternode ownership too, reducing the friction, et cetera, et cetera. So those are absolutely priorities. And I think that the trust protectors could have a role in trying to evangelize for that a little bit. We are, again, at Zymerai, as owners of our masternode hosting company, we are really pounding the pavement to find the target audience for Dash investment specifically, and to try to reach those folks, and of course, bring them under the tent. So 1,000 Dash for, at a certain level of high net worth individual or certainly investment it's the petty cash drawer, you know what I mean? So we're affordable in that sense. So hopefully we can expand the ranks.
Yeah, another thing that's interesting to note is there is a service that has been championed by some in the community called CrowdNode, which allows you to pool your masternode, your money to make up masternodes. And in the back of my day, there used to be a few such services. CrowdNode was there. Then there was what was it, Neptune Dash or Neptune Digital Asset Corporation, whatever it's called today. But they've since moved out of the Dash business, but they had a pool node offering. And then, of course, there was the more community-based ones of, I don't remember if Flare did a shares thing, but I know Splowek did, and I know Mukamu did. And that one didn't end as well as most would have wanted. But the thing is, and CrowdNode is coming out with a relatively trustless shared masternode system. But so CrowdNode has been pumping up their numbers all the time. I think they're on 34 masternodes. So not quite WeeJohnny levels, but you're getting up there. And they allow you to vote. And what I like is you can also just not vote and delegate your vote to the majority of the other users. So you kind of have an outsized voting influence if you use CrowdNode. But so that is bringing a lot of fresh blood in. And what I believe CrowdNode is going to be integrated directly into the mobile wallets. So you can have one-click staking, and you can basically have all your interest from the node pop up right in the wallet, and you can just go spend on that. And that's going to be huge from just the product standpoint of Dash, but also the governance standpoint. I think it'd be really, really nice to see. And so the allow anyone to vote kind of thing, that's one thing I've heard people complain about Dash over the years, like since 2017, is like anyone should be able to stake, anyone should be able to vote. And well, it's like, well, anyone can, but with a certain high barrier, the high minimum, barrier to entry kind of thing. But I think that evolving past that is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, and lower fees for proposals and all of the small democratizing things.
Yeah, which is coming up not too in the next or the current release that is just hasn't been upgraded in the hard fork yet. But yeah, that's coming. Well, anyone, I think we're getting close to the end here. Anyone want to throw in some last minute questions? I'll do freebies now because by the time I get the money and look at it, and it might be too late. But any last minute questions, anyone? No one's commented on Odyssey yet, but at all. But the Google live chat or the YouTube, sorry, is kind of it's going pretty active. I think I covered a lot of them. Do you have any last things you'd like to say that might not have been covered in the question?
I don't think so. I figured we would cover a pretty broad spectrum of topics, and I really think that we did.
Yeah, let me just make double sure that nothing else.
I'm gonna on the replay of when you can replay the live chat, I'll read all of that, and if there's anything that I missed or got wrong, I'll fix it. I'll respond to it.
Yeah. Well, why don't we just wrap it up as that, because it is we're like an hour 30 minutes in, which is pretty typical for these. Sometimes they've gone up to 2 hours, but that's like it's a lot. And then my audience, I'm already getting messages from the other room about like, when's dinner? Are we going to dinner? Like, okay, that's okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm afraid my dog's going to start barking any minute now.
Yeah, start chewing on your leg. Well, anyway, thanks everyone for watching. This has been great. Thanks, Patrick, for jumping on. Definitely, I mean, I expected good things, but I'm also pleasantly surprised at some of the stuff. Like, you're better than expected, even though I would think better, like, input, insight, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I think you should opine more in public channels. But yeah, so
yes. Definitely on the to-do list for the next term. So yes, good suggestion.
Yes.
For sure. And yeah, thanks for having me, man, as expected. And that was a very high standard. I've always been a fan of your work. So thanks for all that, Joel. And thanks for including me in a little bit of it here.
Yeah. Hilawi commented, he says, do the I'm a survivor outro. Well, I mean, if I could have it cleared up and I wouldn't get taken off of YouTube for copyright infringement or something, I probably would. But we'll have to go the usual outro. But anyway, well, thanks everyone for watching. This has been the Dash Podcast. We'll see you. Because it was delayed a week, I might try to do the next one next week as well. So it might be instead of like every week. I don't know who that is, but Sam is coming on in a month maybe. So that'll be fun. Always like, comment, share, subscribe. There's 14 people watching and I don't know how many likes. So on your way out, hit the like button. Yeah, 19 likes. There we go. That's good enough. Still hit the like button on the way out. Comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Now's the time when we do the thing called the after party, which is just it's a conversation like this, but it's not recorded and it's not live streamed, so you can say whatever you want. And that's like an invite only thing. So, but the way you get the invite is you go to the Dash Discord, which if you go to staydashy.com, you get in there. And if you're not on the Dash Discord, you should be, because stuff happens. And just start asking around, hey, where the after party at? Or if you can just message me wherever you know how to message me. Like if you're just watching on like Twitter or something, you just DM me there. Be like, hey, where's the link? And you'll get put in. I won't be there for a few hours probably, but I might poke my head in. But it's where the after stuff usually happens. So there's been quite a lot of, just like we talk about, like, a lot of historical revolutions I'm sure have happened in like pubs and stuff among friends. The after party is the version of that. There's a lot of very interesting stuff that has been talked about, revealed, etc., etc. And yeah, so join the after party, I guess, guys. Thanks one last time, Patrick, and I'll see everyone next week.